Hello, EDCI6710 classmates. This is my coworker, Carolyn, and the two of us are going to discuss the learning targets, what we've covered so far in our course the first 4 weeks, and we're going to try to do this in about half an hour, so okay. We'll see how well this goes. But I had a PowerPoint presentation to show, and now that you're here, it's just the two of us, Carolyn. I think I'll just do it on the laptop, and we can look and look at it. But my main purpose in doing the learning targets was I was hoping that you would understand about what is a learning target, and you'd also look to see how they're created and why we could use them in our program, and how they could benefit the overall program as well. Okay. So first thing I was going to have you do is imagine that you are in 7th grade, and your teachers asked you to annotate a text, a science text, because we teach science. So I happen to be subbing at middle school, and this is what the teacher left for the students to do. And what do you think you would do in order to annotate?
If I was a 7th grader?
Yeah.
Write questions on what I didn't understand, summarize what I did understand, kind of like highlighting but in words.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And so after this particular day, I went home and thought about it, and I thought, what, I don't know if that's annotating or not, because I had to look it up. It's been a long time. And but that particular day, I did discuss with the students, what do you think annotating is, and most of them said exactly what you said. Summarize it, or I highlight the things I didn't understand. So that particular day, the majority of students, they handed in something similar to sample A. So I have a couple of science texts here, and you can see sample A. The students used their highlighter, and then they either used context clues or they used the glossary in the article to define words they didn't know. And they just put the definitions next to it. That was most of the students. And then there was, towards the end of the day, a couple of kids that did something different. And maybe because they'd had experience in an English class, because I was not in an English class, they did something similar to sample B. This particular student has a key here, you can see, and they highlighted certain words based on the key, different colors. This particular student tried to connect what they knew prior to the lesson into the article they were reading. They were even asking questions related to what they were reading to try to think about what they could learn more about. So I thought that was really interesting. So out of the two texts, which do you think might be demonstrating what we should be doing in science with annotating a science text?
Sample B.
Yeah, sample B, I agree. How would you grade this assignment? Like if you got, this brought in, all you told the students was annotate a science text, how would you end up grading it? Yeah, so that's kind of that's a predicament.
Through F, are you doing a rubric? Do you want it to improve over time? Like all of those things.
Nothing was left for me in that particular classroom, so I didn't know how she was going to assess it. But so imagine that the teacher did grade the particular papers here, and if you were sample A, you earned a D on it. How do you think you would feel if you were that person handing in sample A?
Well, because there were no clarifications, requirements, expectations.
Yeah. I see this a lot, that we don't tell the students what it is we expect from them and really specify, I need this, this, and this. So that leads to if you don't clarify what you expect from students or what they're going to be learning about, it's ineffective. The kids aren't learning, you're not giving instruction in an effective way. So there's a mismatch between what the student perceives as what they're supposed to do and what the teacher expects the students to be doing. I like this particular quote here. It mentioned that if the curriculum is hidden from the student, then only the students that know how to kind of play the game, figure out what the teacher really wants, are going to do well. So if you're a new student to the school, you're a new student to the country, you're a struggling reader, writer, math person, you struggle in that. Can you imagine being put into a classroom where you don't really know how to play the game? You can see you're already, having a
My daughter figured out in her math class, if she has her notes in all different colors, she gets a better grade than if they're in one color.
Okay, so, and I don't know if the teacher had told her that? No. It's so interesting, yeah.
It's like playing a game, yeah.
Okay, so I briefly talked with you about what text features do you think, annotating, you mentioned summarizing and the parts of the text that you did not understand, you would want to annotate. Is there any other feature that you think that should be put into a science text to annotate?
Things that I think would show up on a test, which I don't know what that would be at this point, but just like big ideas.
Yeah, like the principles behind the laws and theories and stuff. That's, So imagine that instead of when I came to that particular classroom and simply put up annotate with text, I'm going to click to be in a class. Instead I'd said something like this particular statement here. Today, by the end of our lesson, we will be able to annotate science text using text symbols. Mm-hmm. And this particular statement is called a learning target. So at the beginning of the lesson, if I set that as a learning target, I'm thinking students might understand that something's due by the end of the class, something about annotating, and we're going to use text symbols. You may not know exactly what that is yet, so adding to that, I would tell the students as well, to know how well we're learning to annotate text, I'm going to get you to compare your work to another sample, and then I have to present that sample. In this case, I would show them sample B that had the key on the side and how they use that key to highlight and elaborate on points within the text. So they'd have a way to reference what they're doing. And then I think also with learning targets, you need to discuss why. Why is it that we're doing a particular activity in this class? So in this case, I wanted to emphasize to students that if you annotate, you're learning a skill that can be used in any subject and with any kind of text, nonfiction and fiction. And it helps you understand and summarize it like you were mentioning before. So it helps with your learning regardless if it's science or not. Maybe that will be motivation enough for a student to go, oh, I want to learn how to annotate.
Yeah.
Okay. So based on my graphic too, I would end up giving the students, because if I'm going to assess them on it and they need to assess themselves on it, they need to know exactly which symbols I want them to look at. And I could ask them, like I asked you, what symbols do you think we should be looking at? And maybe they would say big ideas, like you mentioned. So I had a particular graphic here that I made up, and then I would then look to see students using that graphic as they were working on their annotations, and I'd be able to take it and I could either summatively assess it, or I could use it as a formative assessment and then hand it back to students that needed more time. I think too, if you have struggling readers and they're not able to, for instance, find a claim, they don't know what a claim means in evidence, then at least you can tailor that particular graphic to say, I want you to work on this today, or what would you like to work on today? And they can set their own goal.
Yeah.
And then work on that if you keep track to it. Hopefully over the course of annotating by the, whatever months or whatever it takes for them to learn how to annotate, they are then at the level they need to be with the rest of the class. Okay. So, a learning target then. What it is, what it isn't. According to this is my class textbook this year. Not too bad, yeah. And according to the authors, a learning target then, when you want to help the students to know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to do it, is like just a chunk, just within that lesson. This is the goal for today, not for the month, not for the next 2 weeks, just for today. This is your goal. And the students have to be able to understand it. So that's what this first part is in here. Not only do they understand what they're going to be doing, they can assess themselves with it. And the teacher can also assess if they're reaching that particular goal during that lesson. It is a way to evaluate whether a student has deepened their knowledge, because all students come in with different amounts of prior knowledge. And it's a way for them to add knowledge to their existing framework, say. The thing that I've been noticing, what I thought was a learning target isn't. Like, I thought a learning target was our NGSS performance expectation.
Yeah. They're big.
They are, but I just thought, well, this is what they've got to learn. It says right there.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it's the science and engineering practices, or the core ideas. Maybe that's it. But it's not. And neither is it an instructional objective. Like today I want my students to learn how to use the microscope, and I want them to be able to focus in on, you know, the pond water and be able to relate what the pond water is to, you know, the extreme health and stuff. So if I phrase my learning target from a teacher's point of view, the students may not understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be an instructional objective, it has to be a student,
Okay.
you know, framework. Do you think that students understand the NGSS performance expectations when we post them?
No.
No, okay, so why are we putting them up? Like, I still want to put them up, but why would I want to put them up in our program?
Like to remind yourself and to remind other teachers, like, don't forget about the students.
Right, I think where we work, the teachers want to know, why am I coming on this trip? Yeah, what are my students learning towards the NGSS? So I think it's important we still tell them that you're learning this performance expectation today.
Yeah.
So it's really there for the teachers.
Yeah.
Okay. Learning targets then, I believe the purpose of them is to raise students' achievements. And if you start with an effective learning target, then your instruction's effective.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll increase their understanding. If your learning target also is influenced by the students' learning, like what's meaningful. When I asked you, what would you think you need to annotate? And that was incorporated into my rubric, what to look for. Then that also makes it meaningful, which then the student can raise their achievement because they feel like they own, I know how to do that right now, and I'm gonna work on this one other part of the annotation kind of a thing. So it's kind of a little graphic here to try to emphasize that if we include learning targets that are for the students to own, it'll help us teach, it'll help them learn. That's really what we want. Okay. So today's lesson, what we're going to do together today, I'm hoping our learning target is to design and write a student-friendly learning target that will implement a scientific skill or process. So we're going to practice creating a learning target. Okay. To know how well we've done this, we're going to be able to take a performance expectation, an NGSS document, and unpack it, like read it in terms of a learning target goal. And then to know how well we have written it, we're going to look for three things. We're going to look for an essential skill or concept that we want to emphasize during a daily lesson, just one lesson. We're going to look for what kind of thinking, reasoning do we want the students to be able to exhibit to do that particular skill? Are they just going to recall something? Are they going to apply that skill to something else? So we'll use a little Bloom's taxonomy to be able to figure that out. And then finally, the third thing, we have to come up with what they call performance of understanding, where the student does something to prove that they have indeed understood and comprehended what it is that we're trying to teach them. So, you know, every lesson needs to have a performance of understanding. It can't just be passive. Two students have to do something to prove that they know what's going on. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, the reason too why I think we need to start incorporating learning targets into our lessons is because when students show up at our program, we have no idea what their capabilities are. We just have a general, developmentally appropriate view of what a second grader can do compared to a fifth grader. So if we really look at the learning target we want to focus on in our lesson, then differentiating it might be a little bit easier because we're more aware of, you know, it's a second grade lesson, but I'm going to kind of make sure that a student that might be at a first grade level can do it and someone at a third grade level can be challenged with it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you paraphrase that word in bold? That's the learning target. Can you kind of tell me what it is you think we're going to do today?
So we're going to look at a scientific skill and then think of something they can do to demonstrate that skill.
Okay, great. And then we also have to consider what kind of thinking do they have to do. That was something else they really wanted to emphasize, because I noticed too, reading through all the NGSS documents, they want to try to get kids to do more of the higher Bloom's taxonomy. Not to say you can't design a lesson that has them just recalling, but I think the other thing I've been learning about learning targets is that the lessons that you create with learning targets have to get more and more higher level thinking. So you might start your unit out with a learning target that's simply recall, and then, but by the end of the unit, they have to apply what they've learned.
So you're growing.
Yeah, so within the unit.
Yeah.
But again, learning targets themselves each day, you're just focusing on the one skill or the one process. With regards to incorporating your learning target into your lesson, you start by presenting it like I did with you. I said, this is our learning target today, we're going to write a learning target. And then after you've done that, you need to actually model and show the student how to do the learning target so that they're aware. Like I was mentioning, you would have to have for the annotated activity, a sample annotated text, and your graphic to show these are the things I'm looking for. And if a student was confused about how to look for a claim, you'd have to clarify before you even let them go and practice it. So I wanted to model and explain a little bit about how to do write a learning target. Okay. So I'm going to focus on one we have not covered in our program. It's one that I did with the teacher at our school when I was volunteering. So it's Next Generation Science Standard, grade level 5, Earth and Space Science 2-2. And this is the performance expectation written here. So students are to describe and graph amounts and percentages of salt water, fresh water, in various places on Earth. And they need to provide evidence about how is water distributed on Earth, basically. So looking at just the green text there, do you think you can see any skill or concept? So maybe I should clarify what you think a skill is in science. What kind of skills are we trying to get?
Graphing.
Yeah, so there's a math skill.
Percentages, what is a percentage?
It's a math skill, yeah.
Vocabulary, like what's a reservoir, if somebody doesn't know what that is.
So English language arts, we're looking how to read and write, speak. Those are skills, yeah.
What is evidence? What kind of evidence are you looking for?
I guess in this case, they would want to know, perhaps you would, you'd have to refer back to, if you've read about it and said, this much of water is in the Caspian Sea compared to over in the Bay of Bengal or something, right? A different part of the earth. So based on their skills, their reading skills, they could give you evidence because they could cite text. Okay. So you understand the word skills, and then the concepts part there. Do you see any like big ideas or science concepts that maybe we?
I mean, saltwater and freshwater, but that's pretty basic. That's
okay, but yeah, they might need to know that. Yeah, and just
distribution, because you need the water cycle in there.
Okay, so I didn't even think of that one. That was a good one too. What I'm going to do now, so when I go to unpack my performance expectation, you can look here on yours. I can see that I've got the performance expectation written up here on the document. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to annotate it. I'm going to, so I'll go to this next one here, and I've got, and that should be the next page for you. I've got a little chart, the next one over. Plus I've got the Bloom's taxonomy. So we'll start with just annotating. So if you wanted to, you can do the same time, it's up to you. But I figured, okay, well, if I need to find an essential skill, I just decided to have a lot of highlighters that are yellow. We'll make it yellow. And then, so we'll start with that. So a skill we talked about could be a math skill or could be an English language arts skill. So I'm just going to go to the actual performance expectation and I'm going to highlight the word describe. Because to describe something, you've got to be able to write about it or speak about it. And that's a skill. And then graphing, you mentioned too, was a math skill that they'd have to be able to know how to graph and which graph to use. And then I'm going to skip over, and then I get to the evidence about the distribution of water on Earth. So to me, where water is on Earth, how it is distributed, that's a big concept to understand. Where's the salt water compared to the fresh water? How much of the salt water is there compared to the fresh water? And in the fresh water, different locations, how much is there? So distribution of water on Earth is kind of a big concept to understand, I think, with this. Now, to be able to do to define essential skills and content in these, you have to be really familiar with the science behind it. Or if this is a Common Core ELA, you'd have to be really familiar with annotating if that's your particular thing you're looking at. So having that background is going to be helpful. And the fact I taught this once already with help from the classroom teacher, it's giving me confidence to be able to try to figure out how to make a learning target out of it. So. Okay, so once I've done that, I've got essential skills, and I got in yellow, and then a concept I put in pink. And then there's going to be within the document itself, whenever we do an NGSS lesson, not only do we have to meet the performance expectation, but we have to meet the science and engineering practice expectation. It has to be cross-cutting concepts. It's that three-dimensional learning has to take place. So I have to consider these, and then we have to incorporate ELA and math. So I thought, well, I'm going to go through and whatever I think goes with the describe, I'm going to try to find what could the kids be doing to describe something. So if I look to the math and I find that first bullet point, it says right there that your students, if they do this performance expectation, should be able to describe and graph quantities such as area and volume. So that's a specific skill that they've mentioned, and they want an area and volume to be able to do that.
Okay.
And then the middle section, the disciplinary core ideas, I find that this particular section, to me, is more of a teacher help. Like, it kind of gives me the answer. It says here that the ocean's got the most, and lakes and stuff don't really have that much fresh water, and so that's sort of, to me, I'm like, okay, that's just kind of my area to make sure I understand that my lesson it tells the student this. Okay, so the cross-cutting concepts, that's another thing though that is kind of a big idea that we have to incorporate. So if we look here, they believe that scale, proportion, and quantity is an important theme with this lesson. So if I look here and the bullet point, it says standard units are used to measure and describe. Oh, there's my word describe again. So I'm going to highlight that describe. I'm going to do describing physical quantities. And in this case, such as weight and volume. So my students somehow have to be able to weigh something, you getting mass, how many grams, or they have to, how many milliliters, liters of something. They've got to show me that. Okay, and then, so that's with the describe. If I keep going down here, I've got reading. They're, being able to read at grade level, to draw out information they need. I see the word recall, so that's something else. Summarizing, paraphrasing, okay. So I guess if you're describing something, I know with our particular lessons, we don't generally do a lot of reading. If you were the classroom teacher, you might be highlighting that, but for us, I think we're just really gonna have them recalling relevant information from experiences. We're not gonna give them a lot of text when they come, because that's something they can do in the classroom back at their home school. But at our program, we're gonna give them an experience, and they're gonna recall what it is they did to help them to answer what's needed. Okay, so that's another part of the describe. Also, I'm not necessarily going to highlight the speaking and listening because we don't really use much multimedia at this point. Hopefully we'll start using those iPads and then they can make little videos of themselves to send to their teacher on Seesaw. But at this point, you can simply ask the students to tell you what it is you're doing, or you can stop and do a whole class discussion or something. So I'm going to skip that one there. All right, if we go to the next one, so I forgot to give you a pen, so I'll go grab a pen or pencil. But when I was thinking that I could, give this one. I could, if you put a number 1, say, with that, then anything that's supporting that in the document, we could put a 1. So we know that if we are describing, we're going to meet this science and engineering practice, we're going to meet this cross-cutting concept, and we're going to meet this writing. So if an administrator came in, not only are we giving them a learning target, we're letting them know, oh yeah, we're covering this W5.8 Common Core Standard right now too. Okay, so graphing, similar idea. I'm just going to look, oh, there's the graphing thing, I've already talked about that. I'll put a 2 over here, and I'll put a 2 there, because it kind of tells me that's also covering that. And in terms of graphing, if you look here, standard units are used to measure. I don't know if we're going to need that yet. Let's just take a look. I'll skip that for a moment. If I go down to the math part here, reason abstractly and quantitatively. Well, that was measuring and that's describing, so I'm going to highlight that one because I just going to need to be able to do that in graph. I don't know about this reasoning yet, so let's go to the next one, model with mathematics. So right away, models. You got to make a model. So you can make a model. If you're going to support this math, you can make a model. When I did this with the students, I made them make a model. So I'm going to highlight this. It was an experience that they used then to reason abstractly and to measure. So I can put that as part of the graphing or describing, it's up to you. I'll just put a 2 there, 2 and 2, just kind of meets them. And then the last thing, distribution of water on Earth, evidence. Well, I know that evidence to show that they have understood where water is can be used in a model.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to put a 3 next to that pink, and I'll put a 3 next to the word model. Okay. If you take a look then, the last thing, now we've identified our skills and concepts. You don't necessarily have to do all 3 of these at once in one lesson. Maybe you have students that are struggling with math, and you're going to have to today's lesson is about graphing. So you're only going to cover the graphing portion of this lesson and build on
The
that.
model will take a while.
Yeah.
That's why they like having it there.
Yeah. So the next thing I do, I look at my Bloom's taxonomy sheet here, and I try to figure out, well, based on the level of students I have, their abilities, what things can I have them do to describe? So when they describe something, they can simply recall the facts that they've seen if you want. They could explain it. They could use it. So this is more your opinion. What do you think your students are capable of doing? So, for instance, I could just write the word explain, and I've got that next to that. So that's a particular reasoning that I want the students to be able to do today. They're just going to be able to explain their model to me. How much of the salt water they have compared to the fresh water. Okay. If they're talking about distribution of water on Earth, again, yeah, that could be justifying, or if they've got their model out and they wish to critique another model, that could be something I could put in there.
This is what we ask them to do often.
Evaluating. So, yeah.
What's your claim? What's your pattern?
Yeah, so we could put that in there, evaluate. But this is really your choice, this part in here. As a teacher,
Okay.
you could decide what thinking your students should be exhibiting, your reasoning.
Okay.
And then I always, again, for each of my skills or concepts that I need to work on in a learning target, you need to have a reasoning skill. So again, the graphing one there, I know that when I did this with the students, I had the students, they had to be able to apply what they learned in the model to be able to graph it. So they made, in a sense, 2 models. They made a physical model for me, and then they took that physical model and made a graph out of it.
Okay.
So they were applying. So I'll just put the word apply. But again, since I taught this, I kind of know what it is I want them to do, and I knew the level of student had been there for a few weeks, so I knew that they could handle it. All right. Now that I'm done this, you could think about the third thing that we needed to do was to do a performance of understanding. What things did you want them to do? So I just thought at the bottom of the page, I could put in possible ideas. So I was thinking, well, the kids can build a physical model. They could take containers and they could put different amounts of water in it based on what they had. In this case, I had told them how much water is on Earth, this many cubic meters or gallons, whatever it was. And then I told them a simple conversion. This gallon is equal to 1 milliliter, even though it's not. I just said that's what it's going to be. That's the scale. So that was another thing I noticed here, the word scale. And then, so they built a physical model, and then they would then take it and they turned it into a graph. And the thing about distribution of water on Earth I learned was that the amount of fresh water, like in a lake or a river, is like 2 drops with an eyedropper compared to a 2-liter bottle, which is the majority of the ocean. So if they did a simple bar graph, I noticed that they couldn't even see it. So I had to teach them how to do a special kind of bar graph, which leads me to the next part. So now that you've kind of got an idea about what you want the kids to do, and this reason they're going to use, you have to kind of go even deeper. So if you want to take a look in your packet there I got for you, and that's just a picture of the kids doing the activity there. There is a graphic organizer in my textbook, and it takes whatever standard you're working on, whether it's the social studies ones or science one, and then you kind of plug it into there to help you to make sure that your learning target makes sense. So you can see that it's just rewritten, the performance expectation, and I purposely highlighted what we did about a skill or a concept. And then on it here, I've got the first thing I needed to do was to write down and think about the essential content or concepts or skill I'm looking at. And then I thought about, well, what do the kids that generally come in 5th grade, what are they capable of doing? That's where you have to think about, well, what am I going to have to teach? Well, I knew already that most kids can read at grade level that come to our program, and that most kids can gather information, summarize it. They can put it into a data table. So these are just some things that I thought with the lab I'd have to do. Math, they can calculate percentages, they can make a simple bar graph. And then I realized, well, if I'm going to take it a step further, I have to teach them how to make a split bar graph, which is a picture that was underneath in that document that I don't know if you're familiar with one.
Okay.
But you see how it just shows in that one column how much the ocean is compared to freshwater. And then you take that little freshwater and divide it up. And then you divide it up again. So that the kids could really understand. Put it to scale, because that was another cross-cutting concept. So I also noticed that in the past with our program, I've had kids that didn't, like they would take something and measure it and put it in milliliters, and then the next thing they'd write liters, or they'd write something totally different, gallons, and you're like, okay, no, you need the same units. So that was something I thought, well, I may need to reteach that.
Yeah.
Because that was something that was written there, standard units. Next thing, I took you can see I have I used recognize and create in what I wanted them to do originally when I thought about this, but I would incorporate my reasoning skills into what it is I needed them to do. And then the third step would be to put my performance of expectation, or performance of understanding, into what it is, like what kind of lab am I doing? What are the kids going to be doing? How are they going to show me that they are using their reasoning and they're practicing their math and English and science and engineering skills? And finally, the last part is taking, I believe, these ideas and putting them into something that the students can understand.
And that I can understand.
Right. So,
If I'm new.
okay. Yeah, no, this is taking me 4 weeks to get this far.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, okay. So that was kind of a little bit about modeling, and there was my, cheat sheet there for it, but we can just sort of put that to the side. And then let's continue with a little bit about the next stages then. So you've got a learning target, you've got the kids doing, explaining to you what the learning target is for today, you've modeled and shown them, this is what I need you to do today. Well, the next thing you'd have to do is be able to get them to practice it. Before you let them go and do it, I would have the kids, for instance, practice a split bar graph, reading it.
Yeah.
How do you interpret it? What is it? Or I knew that they would struggle with the standards, units, so I'd have to clarify, no, we're not going to do imperial units, we're not doing gallons, we're doing liters and milliliters today, and this is what it means. So there's like little mini lessons you'd have to do, and you have to get them to practice it. During this time, the students, because you've told them we're going to be, like, for instance, in the annotating text, you've given them that graphic organizing, you've told them that, you're going to do this, this, and this, and the student knows, I don't feel comfortable with the claims and evidence thing today. My personal goal in their mind, they're thinking I'm going to look for this, this, and this for now, and then when I need help, I'll raise my hand. So again, it puts ownership on them to take control of the lesson. So I thought at this point that you might want to practice annotating yourself.
Okay.
So this would be like what we're going to do,
Here.
and we're going to use a different one.
Yeah,
Because you have that, but
idea.
Again, because I've got this to compare it, and then, great. So as you're working on it, you can use your highlighters, you can ask me questions.
Okay, so I'm going to read it first.
Sure.
Actually, no, maybe I'll just do it piece by piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the lab that we do with the
Okay.
4th grade that you've done many times with me.
So here I'm going to highlight a skill in this one.
Right.
And then I'm going to a concept. Okay. So develop a model of waves, but is that what they're doing?
They are supposed to.
Okay.
And in our lesson, we just demonstrate it.
Yeah.
But this they're supposed to.
Okay. In terms of amplitude. Okay, so you want to develop a model of waves, and then the pink
is for a big like idea, a concept, a science concept, or something like a definition that's a science term. You mentioned before.
Is that what they're doing, amplitude and wavelength? That's
Yeah.
what they're learning about, so that's why they're developing a model of waves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They gotta know those concepts. What is amplitude? What is wavelength?
Okay,
And then,
okay. Objects to move. Okay. So then I go through each piece and look for the skills, right?
right, so developing a model.
The-
I noticed that the asterisk, like the little bullet point,
Okay.
because the part above just kind of puts it in framework as to what
Okay.
goes on before you get to this grade level and what goes on after. So if you just go to the bullet point, it goes faster.
Develop a model,
Mhm.
that's a skill. And then here you said that was more for the teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. Summaries and differences in patterns can be used. Okay, so sort, classify, analyze. Right, simple rates of change. Okay, and then down here, I'm looking at more skills.
Hmm.
So wouldn't audio recordings and making a visual display be a skill?
It would be,
Okay,
and I believe it relates to describing.
yeah,
Because not only do they make the model, they have to tell you about it.
okay.
So in this case, it's not through writing, they want it through
That
telling, like speaking.
model with mathematics,
Mhm.
depending on what you want. That could differ. Oh, this is the modeling with mathematics.
And both of them are. You could do a
Uh-huh.
physical model,
Yeah,
because we do that.
and this is just drawing.
And that's a model that we've also, that red wave that we put on the board. for
Yeah.
them, they could be doing that too.
Okay, so it could be a model or, okay.
Okay. And then based on that, so you can see the models there, so that's like, you know, to me, these go together, that goes together.
Yeah. Because you have model, model, model,
Mm-hmm.
and then this one is the second one, sort, classify, analyze. How are you gonna do that? You're gonna draw, right, and then you're gonna do audio and visual displays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's also, yeah, good, yeah. So that can be fine.
Okay.
Putting that together. And I think when I was using mine, yeah, here, I thought, well, wait, so, yeah, similarities and differences in patterns, because I thought that might relate to making objects move.
Waves.
Rates of change, which you've highlighted already.
Okay.
So to me, the concept of understanding that waves can cause objects
Yeah.
to move is based on a rate of
Everybody
change.
talks about tsunamis, I
Mm.
have noticed,
Okay.
around in our classes.
Okay, so that's definitely
Okay.
a rate of change that you'd want to emphasize.
Where does that say
I
that?
guess that,
Oh,
rate of change.
yeah.
because they could hit, well, okay, that which leads to the next part. So if they are going to be using the skill and the concepts here, what kind of thinking do you think the typical fourth grader can do when they come to visit us? Are they going to come up with their own model? Are they going to copy us?
Time matters for us.
Right.
So I would say you can copy our model, but I would leave room for different ideas
Yeah.
because they come with so many different backgrounds. They come up with great ideas.
So on our Bloom's taxonomy sheet here, at first, you know, for sure we'd have them just demonstrating, which I think is a lower level
Yeah.
skill.
Show me you can do
Duplicating,
this,
right.
but if it's like when we do electricity and then they do come up with
Right.
other things if they have time.
Right, duplicate, and then implement or solve,
Yeah.
so, you know.
Could this be connecting ideas with what they've learned before?
Mhm.
Okay.
So, again, your choice as to what skills you want them to use, and then based on what we actually do with the kids, do you think that there's a performance of understanding that, say if we changed our lesson a little bit, the kids could demonstrate to us and say, here's my physical model,
Mhm.
and this is why there's a change in the amount of energy when I do this compared to this,
Mhm.
or,
So and if
what are some
somebody
things
was
we
having
do?
a hard time, you could say, I am demonstrating this, because I understand. And then somebody else could say, I'm demonstrating this versus this, and this is why I think they're different, this is why I think they're similar, depending on who you're working with.
Mhm. I noticed that I do a lot of demos, and I think what the NGSS wants us to do is let them figure it out.
Mm.
So you give them slinkies.
How do you do?
How are you gonna show me that when, I want you to move the slinky in a way to show me that I can
Okay.
change the amplitude and I can change the
okay.
wavelength. And then when I do demo with a kid, I really do, I don't know if you noticed, but to make it do a shorter wavelength and a greater amplitude, I can actually feel my little biceps, you know, move. Like, you need more energy to do it.
Yeah.
It, you know, and it kind of like puts the two together to say, oh, there's a bigger change when I make the amplitude
Yeah.
much higher and shorter wavelength.
Yeah.
So you want them to be able to tell you that. So
Okay.
we could change that, or we could do the tuning fork with the ping pong ball, but have them do it and really
How
hit that
can
tuning
you
fork.
make this ping pong ball move with these two tools?
And only sound moving it, you know, to start.
You'd be like, that's impossible.
Right, a challenge. But again, you could see that we could change things around a little bit, so they would be developing a model
Yeah.
on their own.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the next phase then. We've just kind of completed a little bit. Oh, and then I forgot, in order for us to actually get the learning target, you'd put it into a graphic organizer. So I have one for you here. And I left blanks in it because I was thinking, yeah, you know, since we're kind of running out of time, I've got, but you would basically, you could think about, well, I thought, okay, so you look here,
What they've done.
we've done prior to this. So our students can present what of phenomena to small groups. You know, they can explain explanations. You know what I mean? That's a higher level reasoning that they can do.
Okay.
So I thought, well, they'd be able to explain what they're doing to either their group or if a teacher came around or the whole class.
Okay.
They may have had some experience modeling. Right?
Okay.
So that's something that we're working on in math. In order to draw a wave, we've got to label the wavelength and amplitude. That's why I left
Okay.
that blank. Sound and light waves can cause objects to
Move.
right. We've got the demo where we do the light, the radiometer.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes it move, the light. So having us just fill in a little bit based on teacher generation. Oh, they can duplicate.
Duplicate.
Yeah, I thought duplicate. But now you just talked about, you know what, you think...
Create later down the road once
Right.
you get the idea.
Right. Okay. So, and then finally you come up with whatever kind of a learning expectation you thought should be there. So in this case, we could write here that the student should be capable of, our learning target would be something to the effect of, by the end of the lesson, we would, by the end of the lesson, students can describe amplitude and wavelength.
Oh, you're taking, okay.
You know, by using a slinky and using a tuning fork with a ping pong ball to make objects, to
Okay.
make the ping pong ball move or something like that. So it's
Okay.
got a specific thing. Then you can go to detail. How I know you were capable of doing this was because yeah, you'd have to be able to do a bit of a demo about that. You know, use something else other than a slinky and a ping pong
Yeah.
ball thing to be able to show.
Do
that.
something else.
Right, and they can compare it to what they're doing.
Okay.
So they need a reference, like I said, they need to be able to assess themselves.
These other materials too.
And we'd have to think about which one.
Okay. Yeah.
So to wrap up what we're doing then, at this point then, since we're running out of time, you would get the kids to actually do the performance of expectation. If the guided practice went well,
Okay.
then you could actually let them go and go ahead and take the slinkies, go ahead, take the
Les,
ping pong
this
balls.
is what you do and like you come up with it, yeah.
Yeah. With us today, I would have had you working on the chicken coop,
Okay.
you know, building materials testing, and you design your own learning target.
Okay.
But in general then, when the students are doing the actual performance of expectations, when they're building the model, when they are reading the text, whatever skill you're getting them to work on, graphing, that's when students need to have that rubric. They need to have a way to assess themselves, and you need to have a way to assess them as they're working.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So finally, during that time in a lesson, if you notice a student's off task or is struggling with something, that's when you can give them immediate feedback so that they can learn and they can understand what it is they need to do to close the gap between getting to that learning target if they're down here.
Mm-hmm.
or if you notice a student's already reached the learning target, to
Yeah.
surpass it.
Yeah,
Then,
the students,
right. So, I thought as well, like in today's, you would, if you had time to work on the performance expectation for the chicken coop here, then you would look for the 3 things we need to look for. You'd look for the scale or concept and reasoning behind it, and what kind of performance of understanding could we do to show.
well, if I have spare time, I'll bring this and try it. No, I'll be like, okay, how can I change my chicken coop lesson?
And you could use the 2, now we've got 2 graphic organizers for you to help build on. And then finally, if you wish to collect I could collect their graphs from that grade 5 lesson. I could have them video record themselves on Seesaw and then watch it to see how they explain using the Slinky. Then you could then either do it summatively or formatively. And if it's formatively, you can obviously give them feedback so that when they have to do another presentation, they can get better at it. And maybe they're working on, that's something else that you're also working on, is presentation skills. So I wanted to thank you for coming to my
Pleasure.
so sweet. And before you stop, recorder, I was hoping that any ideas how you think learning about learning targets might impact how we teach our program. I know that we cannot, we're not going to be able to pack in, and do something so specific that particular day they're just doing one thing, but.
Well, I think because we do our lessons over and over again, it makes it easier because we can kind of test out an idea. It's not like I'm a teacher, I do it once, then, maybe next year. I can test out this idea and see if it works.
We can really,
and then I'm going to change it. So I may be sitting there in my classroom because it's raining and I've already cleaned up and say, okay, I'm going to look at my chicken coop lesson and say, okay, how could I make, or especially the ones where we have stations, how can I make that different?
Right, yeah.
Or take different materials and what do you think this other material would do instead of just the standard 3 materials?
Yeah, I think from this too, I've also learned that we can try to put more of the higher order thinking because we do have time to reflect on it and try to get kids to, let's really get them to try to develop a model instead of just copying me.
And try it over and over again.
Yeah, okay. So thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.